We're having ongoing discussions. We're going to have some discussions with Kirill's camp coming up soon that I'm looking forward to. I know we'll get a deal done with both of these guys. Everybody's on their own time frame. Every player's looking for something different, important. Different things are important to different players. So, they move at different speeds. So we're in a good spot with Kirill. I think we're in a good spot with Kevin. We'll get these things done, and hopefully sooner than later.
And welcome into Judd's Hockey Show. Yes, we're alive and well for all of you who were expressing concern about the fact we didn't do a draft day show from the past weekend. Well, we'll
get into that. And by the way,
summarize that.
By the way,
yeah, what's up?
I respect, and this goes with NFL Draft Twitter. You make a case with NBA, and I'm not even going to pretend there's people that know the MLB draft that aren't like legitimate scouts. But drafting, like looking at all those hockey prospects, like I love World Juniors and I love college hockey. I'm not going to spend a lot of my time like evaluating and try to pretend like how that guy fits into into this team long term.
Well, I think if you have a top 10 pick, you do.
For sure.
But the Wild didn't have a top 10 pick, and so there wasn't. Yeah, I mean, by the time you get to 15 or so, unless you are a draft Nick in your particular sport, then yeah, you're not going to know. The good news was, I'll just start off by saying this. The good news was Bill Guerin had 7 draft picks, which is something Chuck Fletcher didn't used to do.
That is great, yes.
And it's a good idea to build the foundation of your franchise is the draft. It's not free agency. It's not getting cute. It is being good at selecting players, and the Wild selected players. Now, if those players are good or not, we won't know for a few years to come. But that was nice to see them with a slew at least, or I think they had what was it, Dex? They had 4 picks in the first 3 rounds going in.
Yeah, I think five picks
4 last year
in the top 90 picks of this year's draft, and there was drafts under Fletcher where they had 1 or 2 picks. Yeah, and I'm so perplexed. I froze.
You've frozen now. You're just completely frozen. I'm sure. The big news that we want to talk about is not the draft. We'll get to that. The big news is the fact that NHL free agency starts tomorrow. We're recording this on Tuesday. Free agency is going to start, I believe, 11 a.m. Central, noon, if I'm not mistaken, Eastern time tomorrow. And the Wild's in an interesting predicament, Declan Goff, because for 2021-22, they have, I think, approximately, with Carson Soucy being gone, like $29 million in cap room to spend.
Which is a lot.
Oh, my God, they're rich. They can spend. But the problem is, because of the Parise and Suter buyouts, the cap number, which is expected to remain flat for coming seasons because of the pandemic, the cap number for the Wild's going to come crashing down because those buyouts are going to count more and more against the cap starting next year, not this coming season. So that being said, I think what we're looking at here is I think we're looking at the Wild being aggressive in free agency, but instead of trying to sign guys to multi-year contracts, Dex, what we are probably going to see is the Wild try and sign guys to short-term 1-year contracts, pay them, decently for 2021-22,
sure,
but then not have to be burdened with having them signed after that. Let's start with 2 names here.
Okay.
Because these are 2 guys who the Wild has been tied to in various reports so far, and I could see both of them happening unless they get blown away by somebody else, and I don't know that they will. Alex Goligoski, the former Gopher, who is a veteran, well-traveled, was, I believe, last with the Arizona Coyotes.
Correct.
Would like to come home. He would have to take a discount to come home, but there's always that possibility. And Nick Foligno, who was a longtime captain of the Columbus Blue Jackets, was traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs for the end of last season and is now on the market, another veteran, who would be paired with his brother Marcus Foligno. And there's been reports, including from friend of the show, as you call him, Michael Russo, that Nick Foligno could be signing here. Not big splash signings, but well-known names, and the Wild certainly needs help on defense when it comes to Goligoski. What do those 2 possibilities do for you?
Let's start with Goligoski, because actually I think this one's easy to obtain. He still played 20-plus minutes a night in Arizona. That Coyotes team's not as good. He's not the player he was in Pittsburgh. He's not the player he was in Dallas when he was still scoring a lot of goals. But he's someone that can eat minutes. He's someone that can play on a power play unit. The guy has almost 50 power play points in his career, so you can slot him in. And I think he would be the ifdo de facto like Suter replacement from a minute standpoint. I want to make that clear from a minute standpoint because he's probably still going to play about 20 minutes a night. He played 23 last year. I bet that comes down a little bit. I don't see him playing 23 minutes. I'm assuming that he was probably playing top pairing minutes in Arizona. You know, you could make maybe a scenario that he does still end up being paired on a top unit in Minnesota. But actually, I think that one's pretty achievable for them to get on a 1 or 2 year deal, Judd, at about, somewhere in the $2 to $4 million range. If, he is older, he's 35 years old. He's going to turn 36 here in just a couple of days. So he's at the end of his career. He's probably would like to maybe to get another cup. He did win one, I believe, in Pittsburgh his rookie year after leaving the U. So he's definitely someone I think that is very obtainable, and it would make a lot of sense for the Wild. I don't think he's the offensive player that he once was, but he's still got a little something in the tank. He's a minutes eater, and I think he knows his role. So I do think actually that one makes a lot of sense. It doesn't stop the presses, and it doesn't make you jump for joy. Oh my God, they got Alex Goligoski, but I do think it fills an immediate need, and it's achievable need.
Okay.
With Nick Foligno, it's tricky with him. Our friend Darren Doogie Wolfson was on with us in a scoop session earlier on Tuesday afternoon, and he also said that Marcus is pushing it hard for his brother Nick Foligno to come on the Minnesota Wild this year. I would like him. I want him under the right terms.
Sure.
If again, similar to Goligoski, if Nick Foligno wants to chase a cup and Colorado says, hey, you know what? Here's a 1 year deal and you can be, our third or fourth kind of bottom pairing guy here, it could make a lot of sense for him to go there. My issue is I know this guy's a captain and I know he probably would do a lot in the room. I just don't want to fall on the comfortable scale, right? And I don't think Nick is someone.
Yeah,
I don't think the Foligno family, I should say, not even Nick.
I agree with you.
I don't think the Foligno family is someone who are guys who get comfortable. They're ball busters and they're going to hold people accountable and they know what they want. Projecting his contract for me, Judd, is it's difficult. He probably would want at least a floor of $4 million per, and that's the problem. Do you want to give him, if you can get him for 3 years and under, and in that 4 to 5 range? I'm probably all right with it, but I would hope that's not the only move they would make for a forward. That's where I would go.
Well, so I'm with you completely on the contract terms. So Nick Foligno would have to sign, and Goligoski too. They're going to have to sign what I offer them. So like if they're looking for another big contract, you're not doing that. The thing that I could see Foligno doing a very effective job here, Nick, not Marcus, is I could see him being a very effective Parise replacement. Mm-hmm. Like when you look at where Parise is now skill-wise, right? And Nick Foligno's play has declined as well. But he's going to be good in the room, and I think he could definitely be a winger, a bottom six wing who could help you a lot. And again, I will stress this. In today's game, 4 lines is incredibly important. Like you can't have a throwaway line. You need 4 lines that play. And so I think Nick Foligno, bottom 6-wise now, realistically would fit into that, but it all comes back to what he'll take. And if he is going to A, chase a cup, or B, more importantly, chase a bigger payday, then I'm out. Then I'm out for sure. You brought up a very interesting thing, though, and that's the forwards that they're going to pursue, and that's what they're doing. And I think people were a little bit surprised. I was surprised that their name didn't surface more when it comes to Guerin and the Wild. During the draft, the one thing I was waiting for, and we saw a bunch of major moves, I was waiting for the Wild to at least be floated as a team that was talking to teams that were making trades. And I sort of thought, you know what? It's a possibility that they get a center here. Now, the guy that we've been talking about for, I don't know, a month or so, Reinhart was traded from Buffalo to Florida. And subsequently, his contract, because he's a restricted free agent, would have been an issue, not for this coming season, but for after that. And so there were things that prohibited the Wild from probably getting as involved in that as we initially thought that they would be. But if you've got the clip, set up the Elliot Friedman clip that you played on Mackey and Judd before. He of course, is one of the great NHL insiders from Sportsnet, because this one still remains all types of interesting to Wild fans.
Yeah, this would be really, really intriguing if you're if you're a fan of the Minnesota Wild, because Friedman is not someone who I think you and I love to recklessly speculate. I said Thomas Hertl, right? And there was a little bit of maybe steam that he could be moved from San Jose, which those are the
It wasn't
moments,
stupid,
Judd.
though. It wasn't stupid.
Those are the ones where we pat ourselves on the back and we
Yeah,
say, hey,
absolutely.
I actually was onto something
Yep.
there. We're not just clickbait. We're not just talking about things that no one ever wants to talk about. So when Friedman says basically something as prominent as that, you do have to wonder how legitimate this is, or how serious this is actually progressing. When Scott Burnside of The Athletic, who did a great piece, was in the draft war room with Bill Guerin, with all the talking heads.
Where's our invite?
And Billy's a friend. Honestly, just from a reporter's reporting and
yeah,
I bet it would
gotta
be
be.
a blast. I bet it would be just absolutely fun. I'd rather be at the bar stool with Billy and off the record shooting it, so then you and I can use that as for number one, our egos, and then number two, for fodder on the show.
Fair enough.
But this is what Elliot Friedman had to say on Sportsnet in Calgary when asked about the Jack Eichel market.
I think the team that really kind of wants him the most is Minnesota.
Okay.
But it's tricky, I don't know if you read Scott Burnside's piece on The Athletic today, but it certainly hinted at that. Scott was entombed with them, I guess, in their draft room, and I think that it sounds like they talked about it quite a bit. The problem with Minnesota is they have those big cap hits for the space for where they bought out Suter and Parise, and if they wanted to acquire, they have the assets to acquire Eichel. They can do it. I think the biggest thing is that either Buffalo or someone else would have to take a player or two off their cap so that they could make it work. But, right from the beginning, people have always said to me, the Rangers are an obvious one, but people have always said that Minnesota likes it and would love to do it. It's just a really tricky deal.
All right. So I told you a couple of weeks ago, I believe it was, that I'm out on this, that I can't give up the assets that it would take, because it's going to take guys that are going to be productive players. The cap hits to me seem to be excessive. There's questions about Eichel that we don't know. And flat out, most importantly, he's working out right now, but you're still hearing that he's going to need surgery and wants to have it, which means he's going to be out for a decent portion at this rate, for sure. Months of a season in which, by the way, you've got a ton of cap room, and I expect the Wild to be good. So for a variety of reasons, I'm out. That's what I said, but it doesn't matter what I say. When Friedman's reporting this, and we keep hearing this, right? Like I'm yet to see the report that says, Dex, the Wild's done here.
Out. Yeah. From anyone, by the way.
But
too.
I mean, I've seen it from a multitude of teams that have been involved. The Kings were involved. Last I saw, they're out. The Ducks, who have some great young talent, they were involved. They're out. So we're hearing about a lot of teams that, right or not, reportedly are out. The Wild's not one of those teams. So while I might be out personally, I think facing the facts is this very much remains a discussion, and I don't know if it's the smart move, but it's definitely a move that Bill Guerin seemingly would like to make.
Yeah. I think if Guerin is in on it and Guerin knows character, I think I have put the character issues aside with Eichel.
The neck scares the hell out of me.
Okay, but there was questions, and
yeah,
there
no,
still
I
be
still have
questions.
concerns about that.
But I think, Judd, if I'm ranking what I'm concerned with, so number one, it's just the asking price, right? Mm-hmm. And then his character being second, or his neck being second. His character issue now to me is third. Like it's almost, I don't care about that anymore. If Guerin has evaluated and Guerin's talked to enough people, I trust Guerin that the character issue is taken care of. Now the neck issue is honestly the biggest wild card here. You and I, Billy and myself and Wild Brass and actual people, they can come up with legitimate packages, but the package is always going to be interchangeable, right? And especially the longer this lingers, we really don't know what the market is going to be for him. The neck is the scariest part, and rightfully so. It's a neck. It's not like he sprained his wrist. Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's not,
or tore his ACL,
or even tore a muscle. It's a neck. Necks are scary. I understand that, but if Guerin has done the vetting and Guerin is serious about this, I'm all in on it. I'm not going to be upset if they make this move. I think it would be great for it's a ballsy trade and it's a calculated risk, but that I want that. I want the calculated risk here. I want for this franchise and for a sports team here, I want the calculated risk. So I say go for it. Because I know in 3 or 4 years, when we're dealing with these big Kaprizov Suter cap hits, then we're going to be limited. So right now it's years 1 and 2 to figure it out. And if you do nothing, or if you buy time, or if you want Rossi and Boldy and they don't mature and hit their ceilings for 3 or 4 more years, well, then you're still stuck in the same rut you were if you didn't trade for Eichel. So I think it makes a hell of a lot of sense to just do this trade.
The problem is you're flushing this year. That's my problem. If you weren't flushing this year, then I would be with you. I'd say just do it. Like, yes, it's risky. The character does concern me. But I mean, I think the realistic thing is if this kid is going to have the surgery that it sounds like he wants to have, and again, as we've talked about, a surgery that reportedly no hockey player has had before.
Yeah.
And you said yourself, Declan, months. So I'm with you completely on the fact that there's seemingly limited time to do what the Wild wants to do before you're really going to go into sort of a cap hell. And I'm not saying that you can't be successful, but if you're going to do that, then it's almost more productive to do it with Rossi and Boldy and a supplemental piece. So I was and am and remain much more intrigued in trying to add somebody who's going to be a good quality center who can play this season. I just think it puts you in a really tough position because if he doesn't play this year, well, now the cap hits are starting to kick in and hurt and kick your ass, which is just the reality of the situation, good or bad. And now Eichel's still here, but now you can't fill in around him. I don't know. There's a lot of this that, to me, from a timing standpoint, seems to be wrong. And again, if it wasn't the neck, I'm with you completely. Pull the trigger because you've got the window right now. But like you'd be getting a piece that you can't put in the window essentially with any confidence of production until 2022-23.
Well, and I think
that's where I struggle.
Yeah, and my comeback to that is, all right, so if it's not Eichel, like it's Nick Foligno and maybe this Pius Suter kid who didn't get tendered by Chicago, like I don't think you can afford to go into this season running it back with Nick Foligno as your only center addition, and who isn't really even a true center.
No, I think that they will make I think if the Eichel thing dries up, and it might not, like they might trade for him, but if the Eichel thing doesn't happen, I'm convinced they will make another trade for a center who can be productive. You're not going to get an Eichel talent, but the problem is if you get Jack Eichel for this coming season, you're probably not going to have him, or at least the player that we know, for the majority of this year. That's the problem. But I do think that they will make a trade. I do not think they will stand pat and be like, well, we got Foligno and we'll just put him at center. That's not an option.
Yeah,
he's definitely an option to play on this team, but not as that.
And that's what I wonder too. If free agency starts tomorrow, does the asking price from Buffalo start to drop more?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question.
I feel like feel like in the next 24 hours, we're really going to know if he's like, it's going to say a lot if he's going to get moved in between now and the start of NHL free agency on Wednesday, July 28th at, I believe, 12 p.m. Central our time.
It's Pius Suter. I looked it up today. Pius Suter of the Blackhawks, who they surprisingly did not tender, who's a nice little player. But yeah, and we should know it will also be intriguing with the salary cap of so many teams being impacted by the flat market or by the flat cap. It's going to be really interesting to see who gets paid tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Because we always ordinarily have money thrown around by some teams like they're drunken sailors.
Yeah.
But I don't know that's going to be possible across it. It might be possible for some teams. In fact, it will be. I don't know what's going to be possible for as many teams as ordinarily do it. And I mean, we have seen some bizarre contracts given out in the past, which is crippled teams.
Mm-hmm.
Crippled teams we've seen before. So anyway, that's going to be an intriguing thing. Among the trades, but before we get to the Wild draft to wrap things up, among the trades that we have seen, you came across an interesting one today. Marc-Andre Fleury basically given to Chicago for a prospect because the Golden Knights were desperate to clear cap room. Leonard stays. He got paid last offseason. And the weird thing is, Fleury's the one then who had the great pandemic shortened season.
He won the Vezina.
Yeah, he won the Vezina. He was outstanding. And then it sounds like he learned of being traded to the Blackhawks via Twitter And
That's
if you recall,
unfortunate.
it broke down, and he's a class act.
Yes.
It broke down between Fleury and the Golden Knights a year ago as well when Leonard took over for him in the playoffs in the bubble, and Fleury was basically benched, and we all thought he was done then. It's going to be interesting to see if he indeed plays, though, because I will say this, if he can come back at a semblance of the guy that he was this past season, Chicago Blackhawks are going to be far improved in goal, and we are talking about the Central Division all being put back together.
Yep.
So the Wild will be impacted potentially by that move.
Yeah, I feel bad for Fleury.
Oh, yeah, it's a crappy thing they did to him.
And you know what? I feel bad for Fleury, but I applaud Vegas for being also ruthless at the same time. I do applaud Vegas.
Why would you call the guy, though?
No, that part they screwed
That's
up.
classless.
No, they screwed that part up. But I do applaud them for realizing that, hey, he's, for whatever reason, propped up his value. Let's bail now. We're spending, $13 million of our salary cap to 2 goalies. That's dumb. The Wild are spending $4 million to Cam Talbot and Kaapo Kähkönen, and it's a bargain compared to that. I applaud Vegas for saying, you know what, even though you were our first pick and you can make a case he's the heart and soul of the Vegas Golden Knights, we're going to capitalize and trade you now. Now, they literally said, just take him off our hands. Here's this, that prospect Chicago gave back, I don't think is anything. I don't think it's anything of substantial. It was just literally a throw-in. They took the whole contract to say, take it on, and now Fleury basically is contemplating if he even wants to do this. And Marc-Andre Fleury, and we were talking about in the playoff series against the Vegas Golden Knights, I think he's one of the most misunderstood goaltenders of all time. I mean, he's won 3 Stanley Cups. He's I believe top 3 all time in shutouts and wins. He's quietly one of the most productive goaltenders that's ever played, and we don't talk about him in the same vein as a Brodeur or a Hasek or a Waugh because he wasn't, the longevity maybe wasn't there. But when times matter the most, there was a time where he was the guy. So if he went to Chicago, yeah, it makes Chicago better because their goaltending would improve. And Taves and Kane are still good. They're not the players they were when they're giving Wild fits 6-7 years ago.
Taves is unknown at this point, too, coming off his COVID battle, we think.
I like Kirby Dach a lot.
Yeah.
I know Strome could be possibly trade bait. They gave up on Duncan Keith, and they're not the team that they were. They don't scare me in the division. If they got Marc-Andre Fleury and he indeed plays, they're obviously better. But they're not a team that I would be too concerned with if I were the Wild, even after what Fleury did to Minnesota in the playoff series.
Keep in mind, though, Chicago did get Seth Jones from Columbus as well, and then signed him to a massive contract. But Seth Jones is a nice player. I think the Blackhawks are going to be definitely improved. I think the division's going to be pretty good. I mean, it was previously before, but there's been lots of moves made in that division that I think is going to improve teams. I still expect the Wild to be very competitive. Let's wrap things up with the draft here, okay? All right, folks, we're getting to the draft. We're finally going to do it. We're finally going to delve into the draft. 7 picks over 6 rounds by the Wild because they traded away their 7th round pick. They start the draft. Factoid I looked up on Friday night at the Twins game, by the way. Mm-hmm. They start the draft by taking Jesper Wallstedt, a goaltender. They traded up and took him with the 20th pick. He's from Sweden. He's 6'3", 214 pounds. And here's the fact. He is the first goaltender to be drafted by a Minnesota-based NHL team ever. The Minnesota North Stars drafted from 67 to 92. Never took a goalie first round. You're now saying, what about Don Beaupre? Beaupre was a second-round pick. The Wild, starting in 2000, have never drafted a goaltender in the first round either. So this kid becomes the first goaltender to be taken in the first round.
Yeah, and honestly, he fell. A lot of the rankings that I did do in the mini research is me putting on my Adam Schefter NHL draft scout hat, if you will. He was a top 10 guy from a prospect side. Now, goalies are difficult to project because it's one thing in hockey, Judd, when unless you're a top pick, it's very likely that 98% of these players drafted aren't going to be playing in the NHL or making a significant impact, I should say, for at least 3 to 5 years. It's similar to the baseball draft. And goalies are even more tricky because they can just take a long time to marinate. Look at Darcy Kemper. Look how long it took for him to hit a stride in his NHL career.
Yep.
Now, with this kid being a first-round pick, being 18 years old, I would assume that he's not going to be here for at least 3 years at the very minimum. But it's a goalie prospect. Spencer Knight stepped in for Florida, played pretty well, so you never really know what can happen. But I I do think it was a decent move if they weren't going to trade those picks for Jack Eichel, that they took something of need. They took a position of need. If Kaapo Kähkönen isn't, Cam Talbot's got a shelf life on him. So
That's the more important one.
I think
Cam Talbot's the more important one.
you
You're
need to be aware that drafting in position of need versus best player available, you sometimes have to, again, kind of like analytics versus eye test, you have to marry the two. You have to figure out which one you want the most. And I think taking a goalie in the first round was the right pick.
Yeah, I think what this does is because you now have some depth in goal with your franchise. I think this puts you in a position to possibly trade a goaltender in a future deal.
Yep.
Or what you just said, which is you create a cushion because Cam Talbot's probably going to be gone after this contract. I think he's going into year 2 of a 3-year deal. Is that right?
Yes.
And so I wouldn't expect that he's going to have a long tenure here. I like him; he's fine. But you could be in a couple of years looking at something like a Kaapo Kähkönen and then this kid playing goal. And if you do that, what's smart about that is you can do it on the cheap. Mm-hmm. And if they're good, who cares? Mm-hmm. So it's, in a salary cap league, again, and this is why the Eichel trade sort of scares me, given the parameters of what we're dealing with here. In a salary cap league, if you can develop your picks, I think I'm scarred by Chuck Fletcher.
Well, yeah.
I think he's doing it again in Philadelphia, and they all think it's great because he's trading for these name players. And he gives up his first-round pick. He gives up 2 second-round picks. I mean, he gives up, and I know it's not that big a deal, a 7th-round pick. But Chuck Fletcher, my God, haven't you learned anything? The 2 things that Chuck threw around like they were candy were draft picks and no move and no trade clauses. And it drives me nuts. And look, he's gone, but I think I'm scarred by that because, Dex, when we did our all-time wild draft rankings during the pandemic, when we were just desperately looking for content, and you went back and realized, like ordinarily, it's a pain because you're like, I got to go through all these drafts, right? Yeah, that whole project took me 10 minutes?
Yeah, not very long.
I mean,
15, 20 minutes.
Because they basically didn't have picks.
No.
And the picks they did have were often crappy.
Yep.
But I was just like, I was so glad to see Bill Guerin actually selecting players. Look, free agency's fun, and like it's real sexy to add a player as a free agent, and trades are fun. But when you go back and look at those Fletcher years, especially, and Risebrough also wasn't great. When you go back and look at like how little they value draft picks, it's just nuts. Sorry, end of rant. All right, what else did I have? Oh, speaking of positions of need and positions of just trying to strengthen, I also like the draft because of the 6 skaters that they picked, Dex.
Yep.
They took 4 defensemen, 2 centers. Now, one of the centers, Josh Pilar, who's from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, is listed as a center wing. But in hockey, I like taking defensemen and centers. Unless you in the first round get a phenomenal wing, because you can always move the centers to wing, right?
Yep.
You can't move the wings to centers. But I think that's a very, very smart idea. And as far as the defensemen go, let me go through the heights too. Heights and weights, because that's important as well. Carson Lambos, who they took a defenseman from Winnipeg, is 6'1", 197. Jack Pert, who's a local kid or a Minnesota kid, Grand Rapids.
Mr. Hockey winner.
Mr. Hockey, yeah, exactly. So he was their 2nd-round pick. He's 5'11", 186, but probably still growing. They took Kyle Masters in the 4th round, 6'1", 175 from Edmonton. And they took Nate Benoit, a defenseman, in the 6th round, 6 feet 168. But my point is, I like pursuing big defensemen.
Yep.
Because they're never going to go out of style and they're playoff players.
Yeah, you need big guys.
I like this draft.
Yep.
Like just as far as the heights and weights and positions.
Yep, you need big dudes.
Passing, no judgment on how good they're going to be.
Correct. You need some big guys. So I think that was the right move to do as well. I mean, what was it? It's off sport, but the Angels, didn't they take 20 straight pitchers in the MLB draft?
Yeah, they took all pitchers.
20 pitchers. Why not?
Yep.
Well, odds are 2 of those guys are probably going to turn into something.
Oh, yeah, which absolutely builds a very interesting question about the National Football League draft, which is, should more teams just take quarterbacks? Because if you hit on one, it's gold. If you hit on oh my God, we got a running back who's great. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's good. That's real good. You're going to have to pay him. Quarterback who's good, it's gold.
Yep.
Final thoughts before we wrap up this Judd's Hockey Show.
I think we're nearing a Jack Eichel move. That's all. And then that's
You might be right, man.
I'm not reporting that. That is that I think we're getting awfully close to his trade destination happening within the next 36 hours or so.
So what are the prospects right now? Minnesota. I think the Rangers are still
Rangers,
involved.
Kings, Ducks.
Are the Kings still involved? Because they were out for a while.
Yeah, I think the Kings and Ducks could be in there.
Okay, because the Ducks. The Ducks basically said that they weren't going to trade them Zegras or Drysdale,
right?
Their top 2 prospects, who, by the way, I probably wouldn't trade. And I think that ended the Ducks' chances. But they always could come back in and say we've changed our mind.
Yeah, I think those are the primary teams. I think it would make a lot of sense for all those teams to be in. So I'm excited. It's free agency. You know that this NHL offseason has been maybe the most fun NHL offseason we've had since, ironically enough, Parise and Suter signed here. And I'm excited to see what happens. And we will react. We will be reacting.
Tell the people about tomorrow. So if something happens, which we expect it will, we will go live. Free agency starts at 11 a.m. Central Time.
Yep.
And so if we have, because I have to go out eventually to the first day of Vikings training camp, very exciting stuff. And so I'm expecting something will happen. And when the trigger is pulled, we will react to what the Wild has done.
Yeah, I mean, we're kings of content here. So the moment the Wild make a signing, we will be able to most likely react to it right away. Up in that first few hours, like I said, Judd is a madman possessed. Judd sleeps maybe 4 hours a day and works the other 21.
I take a lot of
20
naps.
hours a day.
I take a lot of naps.
So yes, we'll be here for you. Or if Jack Eichel goes down,
don't worry, we will be here. It won't be like the draft.
And
folks.
maybe just in general, bring your microphone to TCO if you have to. And I don't care if that means you have to get Zimmer on or Kirk on to talk hockey with us or whatever it is. I don't know if Clint Kubiak wants to talk some hockey. But just maybe
I'm sure
bring
they'd
the
love
microphone.
if I ran into the middle of the field. All right, we are done, but we're not done until you say this.
Pass, shoot, score.